I'm here with Vanessa Hurst. This is FirstCoast.tv. We were here for her lecture, and the title of your lecture was?
A Compassion Conversation, Engaging Compassion.
All right. And you have a book which is titled?
Engaging Compassion Through Intent and Action.
All right. And so I guess my question is, your lecture was so interesting, and there were so many features of it with Buddhism, Christianity, with a lot of the spiritual columns of our society around the world. If you had to describe what it's all about in a nutshell, what would you say?
What I would say is that compassion is a lived experience. It's really about each of us personalizing compassion. When we wake up in the morning, it's to really think about what we want the day to be, and then to go out of our way to express that in our actions and in our thoughts and our words and our actual physical actions. And so tonight what I really want to do is talk a little bit about kind of the blueprint that I have created. I've given each of you, my son actually gave each of you a card that shows the blueprint of what I've actually written about in my book. There's a man in Louisville that is a professor, he's an associate professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Louisville. And he said that all the studies, all the surveys that he's taken, it's shown that we're really good at showing compassion to other people, not so good at showing compassion to ourselves.
All right. So someone who picks up the book, what would you hope would be the effect of that book on that person?
I would hope when they read it that they think about their own life, not to become a carbon copy of what I've discovered in my life, but to really think about what that means for their life, and then to modify what I've written in the book so that it fits with them, or to throw it out and discover their own path. But what I really want is people to think about, what do I have to do to lead a compassionate life? Our breath tells us a lot of things. If we're calm and relaxed, our breathing is going to be very easy. If there's something going on, if we're anxious, our breathing is going to be shorter, and that causes things too. So one of the things that I recommend is that you focus on your breathing, not to shift it, but just to pay attention to how you're breathing.
Well, what I'm really saying is, when did you come to discover that compassion was important in your life? When did you realize it was something that could be the core of one's life?
Well, I would say that the knowing happened later than the actual being of compassion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I probably really recognized the power of compassion when I started volunteering with Compassionate Louisville in November of 2011. But when I started writing this book and reflecting on my life, I recognized the power of compassion even 50 years ago in my life, that the opportunity, the little things that people did for me that alleviated my suffering, and sometimes the things that I did for myself that alleviated the suffering. So one of the examples that I use that's a more recent example is one day when I walked into Starbucks, and there was a gentleman waiting to open the door for me, and he opened the door and he smiled at me, and I think I'd had an argument with my son that morning, so it wasn't a good day to begin with. But that simple act of loving kindness towards me really alleviated a lot of the suffering and gave me hope for the day. And so that's what I recognized when I look back. It's the little things. It's not the grand gestures, although those are important. It's just the little things that we can do that make a difference. The second pillar is understanding yourself. What I've discovered is that if I don't understand why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, why I'm reacting in ways that are hurtful and harmful and not showing compassion to myself and others, if I don't really understand why I'm doing that, then I'm not going to be able to change my behavior to reframe my life. The third pillar, which is living with curious daring. So I had somebody ask me, is that risk-taking, Vanessa? Yes. What that is for me is it's living with courage, but it's also being willing to risk. So when we're aware, we find those opportunities to really help another person, and then we help ourselves. We lift ourselves up as well.
Would you say compassion and sacrifice are related with each other?
You know what? I think compassion and sacrifice are related, but I think that what happens is once we're compassionate, that the sacrifice is never a sacrifice, because we get more back. That's the one thing I've discovered is when I do something that alleviates the suffering of others, it raises me up in such a way that it alleviates suffering in me. So if I'm depressed that day, a simple act of being compassionate to another person shifts my entire day, so I feel better.
Right. I guess for me, one of the biggest examples of compassion was, I guess it was in a Mennonite or Amish community. A man came in a school and he killed all these children. And what they actually did is they took care of his widow, the killer's widow. They carried his coffin. They prayed for him. They buried him like he was, their brother, their sister. And they just showered the killer's family with all this love. And I was like, wow, that was a big act, yeah.
And that happened when a gentleman killed 3 of his neighbors, and I think it was in Boston just not even a year ago. They were Muslim, and the family said that they weren't going to talk ill of the man who had murdered them. And that's what I thought to myself. It's taking the high road.
Right.
It's recognizing that there's pain that's happening.
Right.
And so instead of judging, I also was on I was on jury duty. And I told people that was the most difficult thing I'd ever done in my life, because I had to think about what people did and also recognize that one act could totally shift your life. So I couldn't look at it as these people were horrible because of what they had done. It was a total shift. And that, when I came out of that, and that's been about 2 years ago, it shifted the way I look at even the news now, knowing that we have to show compassion instead of judgment.
Well, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone here loved it, and I was drawn into it, though I was filming some of it. But I thank you very much.
Well, great. Thank you.
All right.
So thank you.